The cook and a ghost rancher. The wind carried dust like ash over the empty road when Lydia May pulled on the reins. The horse stopped before the split gate of Boone Ranch. A weather-beaten sign hung by one chain, creaking. Dusk was bleeding across the sky, the sun flattening itself against the far mesas. She could hear her heart louder than the cicadas. She slid off the saddle, boots sinking into powdery dirt. A lantern flickered in the window of the barn, and the smell of smoke and old hay hung heavy. She took a breath, clutched the folded paper in her hand, the invitation, and walked forward. Inside, the sound of a hammer stopped. Caleb Boone looked up from the half-fixed stirrup he'd been working on. His shirt was open at the throat, collar dusted with the day's labor, jaw set like stone. The lantern behind him caught the pale scar that ran from his ear to the edge of his beard. He didn't speak right away, just watched her, as if she were a mirage that might vanish. Lydia swallowed, the paper trembling in her hand. "Mr. Boone," she said softly, voice scraping against the dry air. I know this ain't a good time." He said nothing, only reached for a rag and wiped his hands. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man who'd forgotten what hurry felt like. "I came to ask you a favor," she said. "A strange one." His eyes flicked to the horse outside, then back to her. "You got 2 minutes, Miss Lydia." She stepped closer, every sound in the barn growing sharper. The horses shifting in their stalls, the creak of rope, the tick of cooling metal. She opened the folded paper. "It's a ball," she said, forcing the words out. "At Coyote's Rest. The cattle baron's throwing it. All the town's been invited. Even me." He arched an eyebrow. "And you rode all the way out here to show me your invitation?" No, her throat tightened. "I rode out here to ask if you'd come with me. As my companion." The silence stretched. Only the sound of the horses' breathing filled it. Caleb stared at her, unreadable. "Companion," he repeated, flat as the desert horizon. "Pretend to be," she said quickly, the words tumbling out now. "Just for the night. My sweetheart. So folks will keep their talk to themselves." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, more a faint tremor of disbelief. "Why me?" "Because they'll believe it," she whispered. "You don't talk much. You don't laugh. And you sure don't care what anyone thinks. They'll think it's true." He turned back to the bench, set down the rag, and began coiling rope. "You know what people say about me, don't you?" "I do," she said, voice low. "That I'm cursed," he muttered. "That I let my wife die. That I drank myself blind for a year after. You still came." She nodded, eyes glinting in the dim light. "You ain't the only one folks whisper about, Mr. Boone." He stopped moving. The quiet grew heavier. "Where you hiding, Lydia May?" Her hands trembled around the invitation. "A mistake," she said finally. "An old one. And the man who made it worse will be at that ball tomorrow." She lifted her chin then, meeting his eyes. "If I walk in alone, he'll have me for sport. But if I walk in with you, he won't open his mouth." Caleb looked down at his hands. The calluses were thick, the scars older than her memories. Outside, thunder rumbled far off, low and distant. He set the rope aside, wiped his palms on his trousers, and crossed the floor slowly until he stood before her. His boots stopped inches from her skirt. "One night?" he asked. She nodded. He studied her face, the nervous quiver of her breath, the stubborn spark under it. Finally, he said, "You sure you know what you're a skin, Miss Lydia?" "No, sir," she said honestly. "But I'm a skin anyway." For the first time in 2 years, he let out something close to a laugh, more like a ghost of one. He shook his head. "You've got sand, I'll give you that." He walked to a small chest near the door, opened it, and pulled out a dark coat, the kind that had seen winters and gun smoke both. He slipped it on, fastened the buttons, and grabbed his hat from the wall. "When's this ball?" he asked. "Tomorrow night." "Then you best be riding back before the storm hits." She blinked. "You'll come." He turned to face her, shadow falling across half his face. "One night," he said again, quiet but firm. "That's all I can promise." Her shoulders loosened, just a little. She gave a faint, uncertain smile, the kind that looked like it hadn't been used in years. "Thank you, Mr. Boone." "Caleb," he corrected. "If we're pretending, you best start practicing now." Outside, lightning flashed on the horizon. Lydia mounted her horse, tucking the invitation inside her apron. Caleb leaned against the post, watching her through the rain that began to fall in thin, slanted lines. As she turned to leave, he said, "Miss Lydia?" She reined in the horse, looking back. "Why me?" he asked again, softer this time. She hesitated. Then, over the wind, said, "Because you look like a man who don't run from ghosts." The horse started forward, hooves striking sparks on the stones. Caleb stood in the doorway long after she was gone, the rain soaking his hat brim, dripping down his collar. The barn light flickered behind him. Somewhere deep in the dark, thunder cracked again, not far off now. He looked toward the hills, where the town lights of Whisper Creek glimmered faint through the rain. His jaw tightened. Inside the barn, the unfinished saddle still lay on the workbench, a hammer beside it, cold and untouched. Caleb Boone reached for his old pistol, checked the chamber, and laid it back down without a word. He didn't know yet why he'd said yes. Maybe because the quiet had grown too loud. Maybe because some part of him remembered what it felt like to protect someone. Outside, the storm rolled closer, folding the horizon in lightning. And for the first time in a long while, the ghost rancher of Whisper Creek stood waiting for the dawn to bring something other than another day of silence. The masquerade at Whisper Creek. The fiddle screeched, then caught the rhythm again, its sound sharp as spurs against wood. Laughter swelled under the golden glow of the chandeliers, boots stomping on the saloon floor. Glass clinked. Perfume and whiskey tangled in the air. Then the doors swung open. Every head turned. Lydia May stepped inside first. Pale dress brushed clean, hair pinned, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Beside her walked Caleb Boone, hat low, coat dark as a storm cloud. The crowd parted without a word, whispers sliding through the room like snakes in grass. "Boone," someone muttered. "He's here." Caleb didn't look at them. He just kept walking, slow and steady, his shadow stretching long across the floorboards. Lydia's arm trembled against his. He tightened his grip just enough to steady her. They reached the bar where the cattle baron, Mr. Cartwright, stood booming with laughter, his silver vest catching the light. His nephew, Evan, leaned against the counter with a smirk that never reached his eyes. Well, Evan said, lifting his glass. "If it ain't Whisper Creek's own saint and sinner." His gaze dragged over Lydia, slow and cruel. "Didn't expect to see you again, darling. Thought you'd learned your place." Caleb turned his head, one motion quiet but heavy as a loaded gun. "Mind your tongue," he said. The music faltered, the fiddler bow freezing midair. Evan's grin twitched. "Just talking to an old flame, Boone. Didn't mean offense. Sounded like you did." The Baron cleared his throat, forcing a laugh. "Gentlemen, no trouble tonight. It's a celebration, not a shootout." The fiddler started again, too fast, too loud. The crowd exhaled, tension breaking like glass. Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you," she said, eyes lowered. Caleb looked down at her. "Don't thank me," he murmured. "We ain't danced yet." She blinked up at him. "Dance?" He offered his hand. "If we're pretending, we best make it look real." They stepped onto the floor. The band caught a slower tune, soft, mournful, full of memory. Caleb moved like he'd done 1,000 times, every step sure, every turn measured. Lydia followed, uncertain at first, then smoother, her dress brushing the wood in circles of pale light. The onlookers watched, curiosity softening into something else. Respect, maybe, or unease. "Didn't figure you for a dancer," she whispered. He glanced down, one side of his mouth tugging faintly. "Didn't figure you for a liar." Her breath caught. "I ain't lying." He looked past her shoulder to the crowd. "No, just hiding." For a long moment, they moved without speaking. Then her voice trembled up again. "Evan ruined me," she said. "Said I stole from the saloon. Got me fired. Folks stopped coming to my kitchen. Took months before I could even look a man in the eye." Caleb's steps slowed. "He framed you." She nodded, tears glinting but not falling. "I still don't know why." He didn't answer, just turned her gently as the music swelled, eyes dark and distant. When the song ended, applause rippled faintly. Lydia curtsied, shaky but proud. Caleb tipped his hat to the crowd. Not polite, just final. The sheriff approached, gray beard, kind eyes, limp in his step. "Caleb," he said quietly, "good to see you back among the living. But I'll warn you now, you picked a hell of a night for it." Caleb frowned. "What's happened?" The sheriff's voice dropped. "Outlaws seen near the ridge. Some say they're coming for Cartwright's gold shipment. You see anything strange, you keep her close." Caleb's eyes flicked to the door, then the windows, where shadows leaned against the glass like waiting hands. "How many men you got?" "4," said the sheriff. "Not enough." Caleb gave a short nod. "Never is." The sheriff clapped him once on the shoulder and moved off. Lydia caught the edge of their talk, unease stirring in her chest. "What's wrong?" He shook his head. "Nothing yet." Another dance began, laughter rising again. But the mood had shifted, a thread of something sharp running under it. The sound of boots outside, a horse's nervous whinny. Then, the crash of breaking glass. A gunshot cracked through the saloon. Screams followed. Bottles shattered, chairs toppled. The chandeliers swung wild in the air. Caleb shoved Lydia down behind an overturned table, pulling his pistol from his coat with a speed that didn't belong to a rancher. "Stay down." Men in black masks stormed through the door, revolvers blazing. "Nobody move," one shouted. "We want the gold." And the man who hid it. Caleb's eyes darted to the Baron, white as salt, clutching his chest. Lydia covered her ears, heart hammering against the wood floor. The lead outlaw fired into the ceiling, splinters raining down. "Where's the safe, Cartwright?" Caleb shifted his aim, scanning for openings. Then the leader yanked off his mask. Lydia's breath left her body. Evan Cartwright. His smirk was gone, replaced by something colder. "Well now," he said, voice echoing. "Seems fate's thrown us another dance, Miss Lydia." Caleb straightened, gun leveled. "You got bad timing, boy." Evan's men raised their weapons. "And you got a death wish." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but I don't die easy." Evan's eyes flicked between them, sharp and hateful. "You playing hero now, Boone? Ain't no wife left to save." Caleb didn't blink. Lydia's voice cut through the air, shaking. "Evan, please, don't do this." He turned to her, grin sliding back like a mask. "Still begging. You always were good at that." Caleb fired. The bullet struck the lamp beside Evan's head, glass bursting, oil splattering flame across the wall. The crowd screamed again as fire crawled up the curtains. "Run!" Caleb barked, grabbing Lydia's wrist and pulling her toward the kitchen. Bullets ripped through the tables behind them, splinters flying. They dove through the swinging door, breath ragged, smoke rolling after them. The smell of burnt whiskey filled the air. Lydia pressed against the counter, trembling. "He'll kill everyone." Caleb checked his gun. 3 rounds left. "Not if I kill him first." Her eyes widened at his calm. "You've done this before." He didn't answer, just looked at the scar on his hand, jaw tight. "You ever fire a gun, Lydia?" She shook her head. "Then stay behind me." Through the smoke, faint music still played. The band too shocked to stop, the fiddle strings moaning through chaos. Caleb crouched near the door, watching shapes move through the haze. His eyes were cold now, calculating. Lydia looked at him and realized this was not a rancher. This was something else, something forged by fire and loss. He turned to her, voice steady. "When I tell you to run, you run straight for the back door. Don't look back." She wanted to protest, but he was already moving, slipping through the smoke like a ghost. The gunfire flared again. Men shouted. The saloon that had started in laughter now burned in chaos. Lydia pressed her hands over her mouth, heart breaking with every shot. And through the smoke, she heard Caleb's voice once more, low and sure. "Stay alive, Lydia. Just one more night." The siege at Coyote's Rest. Gunfire cracked through the smoke, a violent, echoing thunder. Caleb dropped behind a broken pillar, eyes narrowing through the haze. Flames licked across the rafters, spitting sparks into the crowd that crawled for cover. "Move!" He barked at 2 men near the bar. They froze until his glare pushed them toward the kitchen. Evan's voice rose above the chaos, smooth and sharp. "Find them. Bring Boone out, alive if you can. The woman, too." Caleb clenched his jaw. He pulled the hammer back on his revolver and peeked through the smoke. One outlaw moved near the piano, another by the bar mirror. Both cocky, both loud. He fired once. The man near the piano dropped. A second shot shattered the mirror, spraying shards across the floor. Lydia ducked under a table as splinters flew. The screams had turned to muffled sobs now. Townsfolk pressed flat against the ground, the air thick with smoke and fear. Caleb slid across the floor to her side, knees streaked with ash. "You all right?" She nodded weakly, eyes wide. "They're everywhere." He handed her the sheriff's spare revolver, taken from the floor beside a bloodied boot. "You ever load one?" She hesitated. "No." "Then point and pull. You miss, you try again." Her hands trembled as she gripped the weapon. He glanced toward the bar's heavy door. "They'll burn this place down before dawn." "What do we do?" Caleb looked at her, calm as if he'd already decided. "We make him believe we ran. Then we end it." Before she could ask how, he was already moving, fast, silent, low through the shadows. He kicked over a lantern, dousing half the room in smoke. The light flickered and died, throwing everything in a shifting dark. Outside, horses screamed. The outlaws were circling, shoving barrels against the doors, laughing. Evan's voice carried again. "Boone, you always like playing soldier. Let's see how you fight when there's no war left to win." Caleb paused near the back wall, running a hand along the timber until he found the trapdoor leading to the root cellar. He pried it open. Cold air rushed up. "Go," he said to Lydia. "Take whoever can walk." "What about you?" "I'll draw 'em out." She shook her head fiercely. "You'll get killed." He didn't answer, only pulled something from his coat, a small, tarnished badge. The metal caught the dim glow of the fire. U.S. Cavalry. Lydia's breath hitched. "You were—" He cut her off. "Was. Long time ago." His eyes burned steady. "Now move." She climbed down first, helping two townsfolk follow. The sheriff, bleeding but alive, crawled after them, gritting his teeth. Caleb shut the trapdoor halfway and turned back toward the chaos. The smoke curled around him like old ghosts. He kicked open the side door and stepped into the night. Rain had started, thin, needling through the smoke. The outlaws hadn't seen him yet. He took cover by the trough, reloading with quick, practiced movements. Every click of the cylinder echoed like a heartbeat. Evan's men spread out, shouting, their torches flaring against the downpour. Caleb moved between the shadows, firing once, twice, each shot clean, each man dropping without a sound. The smell of wet dust and gunpowder filled the air. Evan spun at the noise. "Boone, you think you can hide?" Caleb's voice came from somewhere behind the smoke. "Ain't hiding." The next shot ripped Evan's hat clean off. He staggered back, fury twisting his face. "Kill him," he screamed. The outlaws fired wildly. Bullets tore through wooden glass, sparks flaring off the saloon's ironwork. Caleb moved through the chaos like smoke itself. No pattern, no pause. Inside, below the floorboards, Lydia covered the sheriff's wound with her apron. "Stay still," she whispered. The sound of battle thudded above them, muffled but close. "Ma'am," the sheriff rasped. "If he's what I think he is, he won't stop till they're gone." She swallowed hard. "He can't do it alone." The sheriff tried to smile. "He ain't alone anymore." Above, lightning split the night open. Caleb ducked behind a wagon. He was bleeding now, a graze across his arm, but he barely flinched. He grabbed a torch from the ground and hurled it through the open window of the saloon's front room. Fire roared to life inside. Men cursed. Horses reared. In the confusion, Lydia pushed open the cellar door and climbed up, coughing from the smoke. The rain hit her face, stinging. "Caleb," she called. He turned sharply, eyes fierce, coat soaked through. "I told you to stay put. You'll die out here. Better me than them." Before he could turn away, a bullet struck the ground near her feet. She screamed. Evan emerged from the alley, gun leveled, grin wide and hateful. "Well, ain't this poetic," he said. "You run to another fool, same as always." Caleb stepped forward, placing himself between them. His revolver raised, steady despite the rain. "Drop it, Evan." "Not a chance." They stared at each other, the world shrinking to two silhouettes under the storm. Evan's voice lowered. You remember what you used to be, Boone? A killer in a uniform. A dog with orders. You think you're any different now? Caleb's eyes didn't move. Difference is, I know what I am. The gunfire cracked. Both men fired. Evan's bullet tore past Caleb's shoulder. Caleb's shot ripped through Evan's hand. He screamed, dropping his weapon. Caleb crossed the distance in 2 strides, grabbing Evan by the collar, slamming him against the wall. You burn men for greed, he growled. That's a sin bullets don't wash clean. Evan spat blood. You gonna kill me? No, Caleb said quietly. She is. He stepped aside. Lydia stood there, shaking but resolute, holding the fallen revolver. Evan laughed weakly, blood streaking his teeth. You don't have it in you. Her finger trembled on the trigger. You took everything from me. The rain fell harder, hissing against the flames. Do it, Caleb said softly. For a long moment, the storm itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Lydia lowered the gun, tears cutting through the soot on her cheeks. No, you ain't worth the weight of it. Caleb nodded once, and with a motion swift as lightning, struck Evan across the jaw, knocking him cold. The sheriff limped up behind them, pistol drawn. Town'll see him hang. Caleb looked at Lydia. You all right? She nodded barely. I think so. The saloon groaned as its roof began to give way. Flames leapt higher, lighting the rain like falling stars. Let's go, he said. They walked away from the burning ruin together. Her apron blackened, his arm bleeding, both silent as the night swallowed the last of the fire. Behind them, the sign above the door, Coyote's Rest, cracked, split, and fell into the flames. And in the dim orange glow, the legend of Whisper Creek began to take shape. The shy cook and the ghost rancher, standing against the storm. The last night, at Crimson Creek, the storm broke over the valley like a curse reborn. Thunder rolled through the canyons, echoing off the red rock cliffs. Lightning struck somewhere beyond the ridge, painting the desert in fleeting, violent flashes of white. Dust swirled through the night air, and the sign outside Crimson Creek saloon swung on a single hinge, screeching like a ghost in the wind. Inside, the saloon was still. Only the breath of the storm moved through its cracked windows. A lamp flickered low, throwing long shadows across the wooden floor. And in that trembling light stood Eli Mercer, the heartbroken rancher, his duster dripping rain, one hand tight around his revolver. Across from him, behind a row of shattered tables, crouched Lila May, the shy cook who'd once asked him to pretend. Her apron was torn, her cheek bloodied, yet her eyes burned steady, fixed on the door. Footsteps, slow, heavy, mean. 5 men entered, soaked in rain and malice. At their head, wearing a black hat and a sneer that time couldn't wash away, Clayton Voss. The same outlaw who'd left Eli for dead and taken everything that once made him whole. Well, Voss drawled, tipping his hat. Ain't this cozy? The crippled cowboy and his kitchen girl. Heard you're playing house, Eli. Guess we'll see how long the dream lasts. Eli's revolver cocked. The click cut through the storm's roar like a blade. You should have stayed dead, Voss. A laugh, low and sharp. You first. The saloon exploded into chaos. Gunfire tore through the air, bottles shattered, glass rained down, and smoke filled the room. Eli dove behind the bar, firing through the haze. Bullets chewed through wood and whiskey, splattering amber over his face. Lila crawled for cover, her breath ragged, clutching a small derringer she'd hidden in her apron. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, vengeance breathed. Voss kicked a chair aside, closing in. Eli's arm was bleeding, his aim shaking, but his eyes were steady as the horizon. He fired again. One outlaw fell, screaming into the sawdust. Then silence, except for the thunder. Eli. Lila's voice cracked like a whip. She'd seen the shadow move behind him. He turned too slow. A blow from a rifle stock caught his shoulder, his bad one, and sent him sprawling. The revolver skidded away. Voss stood over him now, boots creaking, gun drawn, the devil himself in human form. Always said you were too soft, Voss snarled, pressing the barrel to Eli's chest. Lost your woman, lost your land. Now you'll lose what's left of that fool heart. Eli looked up, breathing hard. Rain leaked through the roof, dripping onto his face like tears. He didn't flinch. You don't know what a heart is, Voss. The shot fired, but it wasn't his gun. Voss froze. His eyes went wide, the snarl melting into something almost human. Slowly, he looked down. A small, trembling hand held a derringer, its barrel still smoking. Lila May stood behind him, breath catching in the dark. "Don't you touch him." Voss staggered, blood blooming dark against his vest, and fell face first into the mud-slick floorboards. The saloon went quiet. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Eli pushed himself upright, his chest heaving. "Lila," he whispered. Her hands were shaking as she dropped the gun. I didn't mean to." He caught her before she fell, holding her against him, the smell of rain and gunpowder between them. "You did what had to be done." Outside, dawn began to break, soft, gold, and almost holy. The storm rolled off toward the desert's edge, leaving the air heavy and clean. The last of the outlaws fled into the canyons, shadows swallowed by morning. Eli stepped out onto the porch with Lila beside him. Smoke rose from the wrecked saloon, curling toward the light. His arm was bandaged with her torn apron. Her hair, wet and wild, clung to her face. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have come back," she answered. A long silence passed. Then she smiled, a small, tired, beautiful thing. "Guess we're both bad at pretending." Eli looked down at the revolver in his hand, then tossed it into the dust. No more pretending. From the hill beyond town, the preacher's bell began to ring. Not for death, but for morning service. The kind of sound that meant life still goes on. And though no one in the valley knew what had happened at Crimson Creek that night, the old storytellers would later say the shy cook and the broken-hearted rancher fought back the devil himself and won. They'd tell of how justice came on a night of thunder, how the weak became strong, and how love, quiet and unlikely, became legend. And when the old men spoke of it around the fire, they'd always end the same way. It began with a lie, but ended in truth. And the truth was she saved him first.